Violent protests, tear gas and pepper pellets have returned to Hong Kong, this time against China's plan to impose a national security law on the city. More than 180 people have been arrested as thousands demonstrated against what they believe is Beijing's tightening grip on the semi-autonomous region.
We are worried that the Chinese Communist Party make use of the evil law to further suppress Hong Kong people. And they try to ruin the one country, two system and just ignore all the Hong Kong people's objections.
The legislation would punish acts of subversion, separatism and terrorism. Protesters say it's worse than an extradition bill proposed last year, which would have allowed criminal suspects to be sent to the mainland for prosecution. It sparked 6 months of often violent demonstrations. Protesters fear the new legislation would turn their right to protest into a crime. But the proposal's supporters and China's National People's Congress argue it would bring stability and have vowed to move ahead with it in the coming days. International critics, including the US, say it will erode Hong Kong's freedoms and hurt it financially.
We strongly encourage China, the mainland China, not to impose this law on Hong Kong. If they do, I can't see Hong Kong remaining an Asian financial center the way it has been for many, many years.
Washington is now considering sanctions, tariffs on Hong Kong goods, or a ban on sensitive technology sales to the city if China moves ahead with its decision. Beijing says if that happens, it will retaliate.
I want to stress that Hong Kong is China's Hong Kong. A Hong Kong affair is purely China's domestic affair. It's within Chinese sovereign rights to determine when, how, and what legislation to put on Hong Kong. The US doesn't have the authority to point fingers or interfere. If the US is determined to harm China's interests, China will take any necessary countermeasures to fight back.
Chinese officials have been trying to reassure Hong Kong residents. They say the new law wouldn't affect their freedoms or the interests of foreign investors. But demonstrators are determined to keep up their fight. And with the region already in recession, economists are concerned over the prospects for the global business hub. Sibel Karkus, TRT World.
For more on this, let's speak to Roderic Wye in London. He's an Associate Fellow at Chatham House's Asia Programme. Welcome back to Money Talks, Roderic. Now, we saw violent scenes return to the streets of Hong Kong there, similar to what we saw last year when protests started in June against a proposed Beijing law. Can you tell me, do you expect Hong Kong to be paralysed once again by running protests because of this proposed national security law?
I expect the protests to continue. I don't know whether it will amount to what you describe as paralysis, but the issues are very similar, and that is the concern of many people in Hong Kong about the increasing influence of Beijing in the governance of Hong Kong and the erosion of freedoms in Hong Kong. And this is the sort of the latest Chinese move is the culmination of a process of strengthening China's position and hardening of its will to essentially crush those demonstrations.
And the timing of China's plans is really interesting, isn't it? The whole world, including China, is still grappling with this coronavirus pandemic. Why is it then that Beijing has decided to unveil this highly controversial law now?
I think it is a little bit of a coincidence, the timing now. I think the Chinese had decided to do this quite some months ago, and they wanted to launch this particular decision on the world at their National People's Congress because it is the legislature of the People's Republic of China, and it is the legislature that will pass this national security legislation. So it is appropriate from their perspective that it comes that it is announced at these meetings. They had already been postponed from early March because of the coronavirus, and they have only just been reinstated. And I think that it is a bit of a coincidence that this coincides with the worldwide pandemic, because I think the Chinese would have done this whenever or whatever.
Well, during the long-running protests last year, we heard reports that of capital flight, that investors were pulling their money out of Hong Kong. Businesses obviously were brought to a standstill because of these protests. But it's interesting, Xi Feng, China's Foreign Ministry Commissioner in Hong Kong, said that the proposed legal changes, so this new national security law, would actually restore calm following a year of protests and therefore return some stability to people doing business with Hong Kong. Do you see that as being the case?
I see that as no surprise that is the line that the Chinese government and indeed the Hong Kong government are putting forward, because they feel that Hong Kong did not have sufficient powers to deal with these protests. I think that is wrong. I think that there are already in existence sufficient legislative powers to deal with protests in Hong Kong. But I think that the Chinese government feel that they need very clearly to reassure investors, reassure the people of Hong Kong that this will not make a big change in their lives. But this is not how it is seen by many people.
Okay, Roderic Wye from Chatham House in London, thank you for your analysis as always.